"Don't look there," the rancher stared, and froze in shock. Wild West stories. From the moment he could walk, he had been surrounded by the rolling plains, endless skies, and the soft whisper of the wind through tall grasses. The ranch his family had owned for generations was more than just a place to work. It was home, school, playground, and sanctuary all in one. Every fence post, every weathered barn, and every worn trail was a part of the stories he carried in his mind. Eli often said that living in the West was like reading a book where the pages turned with the seasons, and every sunrise and sunset was a new chapter. He woke early every morning, long before the first light touched the horizon. The smell of dew-soaked earth and the faint scent of horses filled the air. His hands were rough from years of hard work, but he held them with pride, knowing each scar and callus told a story of perseverance. Feeding the cattle, checking the fences, and ensuring the water troughs were full were tasks he performed without complaint. To many, it might seem repetitive, but to Eli, it was a rhythm, a quiet harmony between man and nature. Life on the ranch was not just about work, it was about observation and connection. Eli could tell when a cow was sick just by the way it moved, or when a storm was coming by the smell of the wind. He often walked for miles along the edges of his property, not just to check on the land but to listen, to feel, and to understand. These walks were a time of reflection. He would pause on hilltops to watch the sun rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and he would often whisper to himself about the beauty of the world he had inherited. Despite the isolation, Eli never felt lonely. The land itself was alive with sounds and movements that kept him company. The rustle of the leaves in the cottonwoods, the calls of hawks circling overhead, the distant laughter of children from the nearby town, it all became a kind of music that he understood deeply. Sometimes, as he worked in the fields, he would talk aloud to the land, sharing his thoughts, dreams, and worries. Whether or not anyone was listening, it made him feel connected, as if the earth itself was responding in its own silent way. One summer evening, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Eli decided to check on the northern pasture where the youngest calves had been moved. The air was heavy with heat, and the grass shimmered gold under the fading sunlight. The cattle moved slowly, their hooves kicking up tiny clouds of dust. Rusty, his loyal dog, trotted alongside him, ears perked and eyes alert. The bond between Eli and Rusty was unspoken but profound. Rusty had been with Eli through harsh winters, scorching summers, and long, lonely nights. The dog seemed to sense Eli's moods, and Eli, in turn, trusted Rusty's instincts more than anything else. As they walked along the edge of the forest bordering the pasture, a gentle breeze stirred the tall grass, and Eli noticed a movement out of the corner of his eye. At first, he thought it was just a deer or a rabbit slipping quietly through the underbrush, but something felt off. The air seemed to hold a tension he couldn't quite name. Rusty's growl broke the calm, a low rumble that made Eli stop in his tracks. The dog's fur bristled, and he stared intently into the shadows between the trees. Eli squinted, trying to see what Rusty was focused on, but all he could make out were the dark shapes of the trunks swaying gently. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The usual sounds of the prairie, the wind, the birds, the distant clatter of hooves, faded into a heavy silence. Eli's instincts, sharp from decades of surviving in this harsh land, told him that something was not right. He had learned long ago that the Wild West had its own rules, and sometimes it whispered warnings in ways that were hard to understand. He remembered the tales his grandfather had told him about mysterious happenings in the forest, about shadows that moved on their own, and whispers carried by the wind. Eli had always dismissed them as stories meant to entertain, but now a shiver ran down his spine. He called softly to Rusty, trying to calm him, but the dog's eyes did not waver from the darkness. The growl became a warning, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. Eli knew he had to be cautious. Every step he took forward was deliberate, careful not to make a sound that might draw attention. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind remained clear. He scanned the edge of the forest, looking for any hint of movement, any shape that didn't belong. The shadows between the trees seemed to twist and shift, almost as if they were alive, watching him. The sun continued its slow descent, casting long, spindly shadows across the land. The forest at the edge of the pasture seemed darker now, the trees forming a wall that blocked out the last light. Eli's mind raced with possibilities. Could it be an animal he hadn't seen before, a stranger lost in the wilderness? Or was it something else entirely, something that belonged to the stories of old, the ones that spoke of spirits and mysteries that defied explanation? Despite the unease, Eli's curiosity was stronger than his fear. He had always been a man of reason, a man who faced challenges head-on. He stepped closer to the tree line, Rusty at his side, alert and tense. The whispers of the wind grew louder, carrying a sound that almost resembled words. "Don't look there," Eli froze, his breath catching in his throat. The voice was faint, carried by the wind, but it was unmistakable. It sent a chill down his spine, a warning that he could not ignore. For a long moment, Eli stood there, rooted to the spot. He looked around, trying to see where the voice had come from, but the forest remained silent except for the rustling of leaves. Rusty's growl subsided slightly, but the dog did not relax. Eli realized that the land itself seemed to be sending a message, a cautionary note hidden in the ordinary sounds of nature. He knew better than to dismiss it. The West had a way of teaching respect, often in ways that were subtle yet powerful. Eli decided to wait, to observe before making any sudden moves. The cattle grazed quietly, unaware of the tension at the edge of the pasture. The sky above turned a deeper shade of orange, then purple, and finally the first stars began to appear. Night was approaching, and with it the unknown. Eli's eyes never left the shadows of the forest. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of the leaves made his senses sharper. He felt a mix of fear and anticipation, a strange thrill that came from knowing he was on the edge of something beyond his understanding. Hours seemed to pass in mere minutes. Eli's mind wandered to the history of his land, the stories of those who had lived and worked there before him. He thought of the pioneers, the settlers, and even the native people who had called this land home long before anyone else. They had all left traces, some visible, some hidden, and Eli wondered if the forest held secrets that had been waiting for him to notice. He realized that he was part of a larger story, one that connected past, present, and future in ways he could only begin to imagine. As the first hints of moonlight touched the pasture, Eli felt a presence, subtle yet undeniable. The air seemed thicker, heavier, as if charged with energy. Rusty growled again, more insistently this time, and Eli finally understood that the quiet warning of the wind was more than just imagination. Something was there, watching, waiting. Eli's heart raced, but he felt a strange sense of calm too. He knew that in moments like these, courage was not the absence of fear but the ability to move forward despite it. And so, standing at the edge of the forest, Eli Thompson embraced the unknown. The land, the wind, and even the shadows themselves seemed alive with secrets. He would not turn away, not yet. He would face whatever was out there, with patience, respect, and a keen eye. Little did he know that this evening, which began like any other, would mark the start of an experience that would change his understanding of the Wild West forever. The stars grew brighter, the night deeper, and the wind carried its eerie whispers across the land. "Don't look there." Eli tightened his grip on the rope by his side, signaling to Rusty that they were ready, whatever might come. For the first time that day, he felt the full weight of the mystery that lay before him, a mystery that would soon reveal itself in ways he could never have imagined. The wind carried a strange chill as Eli Thompson stood at the edge of the forest, his eyes fixed on the dark line of trees that marked the boundary of his ranch. The whispering voice had been faint at first, almost like a trick of the breeze, but now it seemed to grow stronger, curling through the leaves like smoke. "Don't look there," it whispered again, clearer than before. Eli's heart thumped, and a shiver ran down his spine. He tightened his grip on the rope he carried and glanced down at Rusty, his loyal dog who remained tense, ears pricked forward and teeth slightly bared. Rusty's instincts had always been sharper than his own in moments like these, and the dog's unease told Eli that this was no ordinary evening. Eli stepped back slightly, trying to calm himself. He had faced storms that could flatten fences, wolves that had circled his livestock, and even the occasional bandit or two, but this was different. There was an energy in the air that felt neither hostile nor friendly. It was as if the forest itself was alive, aware of him, and aware of something else moving within it. He had always respected the land, believing it had its own spirit, but never before had he felt it speak to him so directly. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a faint orange glow in the western sky. Shadows lengthened and twisted between the trees, creating shapes that seemed almost human. Eli's eyes strained to make sense of the forms, but every time he focused, they seemed to shift, as if the forest was teasing him. Rusty growled low in his throat, his hackles raised, and Eli knew he had to pay attention. The dog had never been wrong before. Eli took a deep breath and tried to rationalize the fear building in his chest. Perhaps it was simply the isolation, the fading light, or his imagination playing tricks. The forest had always been mysterious, and legends of spirits or strange occurrences were part of the West's folklore. Eli had heard many stories from old ranchers and wandering travelers, tales of lost souls, ghostly apparitions, and eerie voices carried on the wind. He had always listened with curiosity but had never believed them fully. Tonight, however, belief came easier than doubt. The whisper came again, carried more distinctly on the breeze, almost like a warning. "Don't look there." Eli froze. He scanned the edge of the forest, trying to determine the source. His eyes caught movement, a flicker, almost imperceptible among the dark trees. He blinked, and it seemed gone. His pulse quickened. He felt a mixture of fear and a strange fascination. There was a force at play here, something beyond ordinary understanding, something that demanded caution. Rusty growled again and stepped slightly in front of Eli as if to shield him. Eli crouched slightly, his mind racing through options. Retreating seemed instinctively safer, but curiosity held him rooted to the spot. He remembered the stories his grandfather had told him, tales of ranchers who ignored warnings and disappeared into the wilderness, never to return. Those stories had always seemed like cautionary myths meant to frighten children. Tonight, however, they felt real, urgent, and chillingly close. The evening air grew cooler, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and pine. Eli noticed the sounds around him, the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant calls of owls, and the whispering wind were all sharper now, almost as if they were amplified to make him listen more closely. Every instinct in his body told him that the forest held a presence, something that was observing, perhaps even judging him. His thoughts spun. What could it be? An animal, a person lost in the woods, or something else entirely? Eli's gaze wandered along the line of trees. For a brief moment he thought he saw the glint of eyes, small, reflective, and impossibly still. He blinked, and the reflection vanished. His heart pounded harder and a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. He whispered to Rusty, his voice barely audible, "Stay close, boy. Don't move." Rusty responded with a low whine but stayed obediently at his side. The bond between man and dog was stronger than words, and Eli trusted Rusty's instincts as much as his own. As darkness settled deeper, the forest edge became almost impenetrable. Shadows merged into one another, creating shapes that toyed with the imagination. Eli's mind raced through possibilities, but none seemed to fit the exact feeling he had: the sense of being watched, the warning in the wind, the tension in the air. He realized that what he was experiencing was not just fear. It was something deeper, a primal caution encoded in every human who had ever lived close to the land. Eli moved forward slowly, careful not to make any noise. Each step on the dry earth was deliberate, measured, as though he were negotiating with the forest itself. The whisper came again, softer this time but insistent. "Don't look there," he stopped, ears straining, heart thudding. His gaze swept across the shadowy forest, and then he saw it, a figure just beyond the trees, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall and thin, standing motionless among the trunks. Eli's breath caught in his throat. At first he thought it might be a lost traveler, but something about the figure felt wrong. Its posture was too rigid, and it didn't move in the way a living person would. Eli's mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation, but the fear gnawed at the edges of reason. Rusty barked once, a sharp, urgent sound that echoed through the still night and then fell silent, ears twitching. Eli knew then that whatever was out there was not ordinary. He tried to speak, calling out softly, "Hello." "Is someone there?" No answer came, only the whispering wind carrying the same warning again. The words seemed to wrap around him, invisible yet undeniable. "Don't look there." Eli's skin prickled. His rational mind struggled, but instinct ruled. He knew that the forest was telling him something, that ignoring the warning could be dangerous. The figure remained motionless, and Eli's curiosity pushed him forward, even as his mind screamed caution. He inched closer, each step carefully placed, listening for any sound. The air grew heavier, and a faint mist began to curl around the base of the trees, adding to the surreal quality of the scene. Shadows stretched and shifted in impossible ways, making it difficult to tell where the trees ended and the figure began. Every nerve in his body was alert, every sense heightened to an intensity he had rarely experienced before. Suddenly, the figure seemed to shift, a subtle movement that made Eli's heart leap. It was enough to confirm that it was watching him, aware of his presence. He stopped moving, frozen in place, and tried to steady his breathing. Rusty pressed close, sensing his owner's fear. The whispering wind circled around them again, carrying the same haunting words, and Eli realized that this was no ordinary encounter. This was something extraordinary, something that defied simple explanation. He took another cautious step, and then the figure disappeared, melting into the shadows as if it had never been there. Eli blinked, rubbing his eyes, convinced he had imagined it. But the sense of being watched lingered, thick and tangible. He realized that the forest, the wind, and the shadows were all part of something larger, a mystery waiting to reveal itself. He felt a mixture of fear, awe, and anticipation. Eli knew he could not turn away. He had faced challenges all his life, from harsh weather to dangerous animals, and he had survived by trusting his instincts and respecting the land. This was another test, a moment where courage and caution had to work together. He whispered to Rusty, "Stay close, boy. We're going to find out what's there." The dog whined softly, acknowledging, but remained by his side, ready for whatever lay ahead. Hours seemed to pass, though it was only minutes. The wind whispered, the shadows danced, and Eli remained vigilant, his mind and senses fully engaged. Every step he took brought him closer to understanding the forest's secret, closer to uncovering whatever had been hidden at the edge of his land for so long. He felt a connection to the land deeper than he had ever known, a recognition that this place, with all its beauty and danger, was alive in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. As night fully descended, the stars appeared overhead, scattered like tiny diamonds across the vast sky. The forest edge remained dark and mysterious, but Eli Thompson was determined. Whatever waited within those shadows, whatever had whispered its warning, He would face it with courage, respect, and a steady heart. The Wild West had taught him that every challenge, no matter how strange or frightening, could be met with patience, skill, and understanding. And so, with Rusty at his side and the whispering wind in his ears, Eli took the first deliberate steps toward the forest, toward the unknown. He knew the night would be long, the experience unforgettable, and the lesson profound. The wind carried its message once more, haunting and clear. Don't look there. And Eli, brave and determined, knew he had no choice but to see what lay beyond. Eli Thompson's boots crunched softly against the dry, uneven earth as he stepped closer to the edge of the forest. The shadows of the trees stretched like dark fingers into the fading light, and the wind whispered warnings that seemed almost alive. Rusty stayed close, moving silently but alert, his eyes scanning the darkness ahead. Eli's heart pounded in his chest, a steady drumbeat of fear and curiosity intertwined. Every instinct told him to be careful, but another, stronger instinct urged him forward. He had always faced the dangers of the Wild West with courage, and this was no different, though he knew it was unlike anything he had encountered before. The deeper he moved, the darker the forest became. The last traces of the sunset disappeared, leaving the world bathed in dim silver moonlight. Shapes and shadows twisted and shifted with every flicker of the trees in the breeze, making it hard to tell what was real. Eli's mind raced through possibilities: an animal, a stranger, or perhaps something he could not explain. His imagination threatened to take over, but he forced it back, focusing on every sound, every movement, every hint the forest offered. Suddenly, a sound, soft, deliberate, made him freeze. It was a footstep, though quieter than anything he had ever heard. It didn't crunch on the leaves or snap twigs under its weight. It was almost like the forest itself had moved. Eli's pulse quickened. Rusty growled low, a rumble of warning that echoed softly through the trees. Eli knelt slightly, whispering to the dog, "Stay calm, boy, stay with me." Rusty pressed close, body tense but ready. Then he saw it, a figure standing between two ancient oak trees. At first it was just a shadow, a darker silhouette among the darkness, but the outline was unmistakably human. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe visibly, yet there it stood, tall and still, as though it had been waiting for him. Eli's mind reeled. He had seen many things in his life: bandits, wild animals, storms that could tear through the land. But this was different. It was not alive in the way a human or animal was alive, and yet it was present, undeniable, a silent witness in the darkness. Eli took a cautious step forward, and the figure seemed to shift slightly. Not in the way a person moves, but almost as if it were aware of him, watching his every motion. A chill ran down Eli's spine, and he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He knew that whatever was out there, it was not ordinary. His grandfather's old stories of strange happenings in the forest, tales he had once dismissed as folklore, now felt frighteningly real. The wind whispered again, soft but insistent. "Don't look there." Eli swallowed hard, his throat dry, but he continued forward. The figure began to take shape in the dim moonlight. It was a young boy, or at least it appeared to be one, dressed in clothes that seemed old-fashioned, almost like something from decades past. The fabric was faded, worn, and torn in places, and the hat he wore shadowed most of his face. Eli's heart skipped a beat. How could a child be here, standing perfectly still in the middle of the forest at this hour? He wondered if it was a lost boy from a nearby town or a wandering traveler. But deep inside, a voice told him this was not an ordinary child, not someone who belonged to the present time. Rusty barked once, low and tense, as the boy tilted his head slightly as though acknowledging the sound. The movement was minimal but deliberate. Eli felt a strange connection, a pull that he could not explain. The boy's eyes, faintly visible under the shadow of his hat, seemed sad, empty in a way that went beyond human sadness. Eli had seen grief before, but this this was different. It was as if the boy carried decades of sorrow, of longing, trapped in that small, silent form. Eli's curiosity warred with his fear. He had been taught to face the unknown, to seek answers rather than flee from them. Slowly, cautiously, he spoke, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Are you all right, boy? Can you hear me?" The forest remained silent except for the whispering wind, and the boy did not respond. But Eli felt it, an awareness, a consciousness in that still figure that was as real as the moonlight on the pasture. The air grew colder, as if the forest itself had exhaled. Eli shivered but remained rooted to the spot, knowing that stepping closer without thought could be dangerous. He remembered the old stories, stories of spirits bound to the land, children lost in the forest who never returned, and strange apparitions that appeared at the edge of ranches. He had always dismissed them, but now, standing here, he felt that the stories had been warnings, lessons hidden in folklore for generations. As he studied the boy, Eli noticed something remarkable. The figure seemed almost transparent, as though the light passed through him, and yet he cast a faint shadow on the earth. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Eli saw it and his mind raced. Could it be a ghost, a spirit? He had never believed in such things, but the evidence in front of him was undeniable. The boy was here, and he was not part of the present world in the way Eli knew it. Eli's mind flashed back to the stories his grandfather had told him about a child who had disappeared in these woods many years ago. The child had vanished without a trace, and the ranchers of the past had searched for months, finding nothing. The story was one of sorrow and mystery, shared quietly around campfires late at night. Eli had never expected to encounter such a tale firsthand, but now, as he gazed at the boy, the connection was unmistakable. This was the lost child, a spirit tied to the land, a living echo of the past. Rusty growled again, and Eli knew he had to proceed carefully. He did not want to frighten the boy, nor did he want to provoke anything beyond his understanding. He knelt slightly, keeping his body low, and spoke softly. "It's all right, I won't hurt you. I'm just here to understand." The boy remained still, his eyes meeting Eli's for a brief moment. In that gaze, Eli felt an overwhelming mix of sadness, longing, and an unspoken plea. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as though acknowledging this silent communication. The whispering wind swirled again, carrying the same words, soft but insistent. "Don't look there." Eli realized that the forest, the boy, and the wind were all connected, part of a larger mystery that he had only begun to comprehend. He could feel the history of the land beneath his feet, the stories of those who had lived and worked here, and the remnants of lives long past. This encounter was not accidental. It was part of the land's memory, a message preserved in the trees, the soil, and the wind. Eli slowly extended a hand, careful not to startle the boy. "I want to help if I can," he said softly. Rusty remained close, watchful and alert. The boy tilted his head, and for a brief moment, a faint glimmer of recognition appeared in his eyes. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving only the silent, still figure. Eli felt a chill, realizing that this encounter was fleeting, delicate, and not entirely within his control. The night deepened, and the stars overhead cast pale light through the canopy. Eli took a cautious step closer, his eyes never leaving the boy. He felt a mix of fear, awe, and responsibility. The Wild West had taught him many lessons about survival, respect, and courage, but nothing could have prepared him for this. He understood that this was not just an encounter. It was a story, a living fragment of the past, and he was now part of it. Minutes felt like hours as Eli observed the boy. The forest remained silent, except for the whispering wind that seemed to echo the words over and over. "Don't look there." He realized that the warning was not meant to frighten him, but to guide him, to prepare him for what he was about to witness. The boy was a guardian of the past, a reminder of lives that had been lost, and Eli knew that understanding this presence required patience, respect, and quiet observation. Finally, the boy took a single step backward, fading slightly into the shadows. Eli felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. He wanted answers, clarity, and understanding, yet he also knew that this was part of the experience. Some mysteries revealed themselves slowly, and some only hinted at their truths. He whispered to Rusty, "We'll be careful. We'll learn what we can." The dog pressed close, and together they remained at the edge of the forest, aware of the boy's presence and the weight of the land's memory. Eli's mind was racing, but he felt a sense of calm settle over him. He had faced the unknown and had not turned away. He understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it, to observe, and to respect it. The boy remained in the shadows, a silent guide and a connection to the past, while Eli stood ready, knowing that the night had more lessons to teach, more mysteries to reveal, and more stories waiting to be told. Eli Thompson stood frozen at the edge of the forest, his eyes fixed on the mysterious boy who seemed to drift silently among the shadows. The moonlight filtered through the branches, casting thin silver beams across the underbrush, and the wind whispered its eerie message again. "Don't look there." Rusty pressed close to Eli's side, tense and alert, sensing the weight of the moment. Eli's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity surging through him. He had faced dangers before, storms, wild animals, even outlaws, but nothing had prepared him for this encounter. The boy, barely more than a shadow in the dim light, remained motionless at first. His presence seemed almost otherworldly, a being that belonged neither entirely to the present nor to the past. Eli noticed small details that sent shivers down his spine. The boy's clothes were old-fashioned, faded, and worn at the edges. His boots, though dusty, were strangely clean considering the wilderness he appeared in. And yet there was something undeniably real about him, the faint rise and fall of his chest, the subtle tilt of his head, and the eyes that seemed to hold decades of sorrow. Eli swallowed hard. He had always been a man of reason, practical and cautious. But tonight, reason seemed to bend under the weight of what he was witnessing. He thought of the stories his grandfather had told him, legends of lost children and spirits that roamed the forests of the West. He had laughed at them as a boy, dismissing them as tales meant to entertain. Now, standing before this boy, he realized the old stories had contained warnings, lessons encoded in myth, waiting for someone with courage and respect to understand. The boy shifted slightly enough for Eli to see his face more clearly. It was pale and delicate, with eyes that seemed impossibly deep, carrying a silent plea. The sadness in those eyes was tangible, almost painful to behold. Eli felt an urge to reach out to speak words of comfort, yet a voice inside him whispered caution. He knew instinctively that this was not a normal child, and any sudden movement might startle him, or worse, provoke something beyond human understanding. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. The wind carried the whisper again, soft and chilling. "Don't look there." Eli realized that the forest, the boy, and the wind were all connected in ways he could not fully comprehend. The warning was not meant to frighten him. It was meant to prepare him. He understood now that what he was seeing was part of the land's memory, a fragment of history that had lingered for decades. And yet, despite the fear and the mystery, Eli felt a strange sense of purpose. He had been chosen in a way to witness this, to acknowledge it, and perhaps to learn from it. Slowly, cautiously, Eli took a step forward, his eyes never leaving the boy. Rusty stayed close, ears pricked, sensing the tension. The boy tilted his head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human but carried an otherworldly quality. Eli whispered softly, "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to understand." The words seemed to hang in the air, mingling with the whispering wind and the rustle of leaves. For a brief moment, it felt as though the forest itself paused, holding its breath, allowing this silent communication to take place. Eli's thoughts raced. He remembered a story from decades ago about a child who had vanished in these woods. Search parties had combed the forest for weeks, finding no trace, and the tale had become a quiet legend among ranchers and settlers. Now, standing here, Eli felt a profound connection to that story. The boy before him seemed to be the embodiment of that lost soul, a lingering presence tied to the land he had loved and worked for so many years. He realized that the forest was revealing its history to him, allowing him to witness a moment frozen in time. He stepped closer still, careful not to make a sound. The boy's eyes met his again, and this time Eli saw something more, a flicker of recognition, almost like the faint spark of a memory. He felt a pang of sorrow, understanding that this was not just a ghostly figure, but a symbol of loss, of a life interrupted, of a story left unfinished. He whispered again, "I can help if you let me." The boy remained silent, but the weight of his gaze seemed to acknowledge Eli's words, as if he understood that Eli meant no harm. The moonlight shifted, illuminating the boy in a way that made Eli's heart race. There was something ethereal about him, a glow that seemed to emanate softly, blending with the silver light of the night. Eli realized that this was not merely an apparition. It was a bridge between the past and the present, a living memory preserved by the forest itself. Every detail, the worn clothes, the solemn eyes, the stillness, told a story that had been waiting decades for someone to witness. Eli's mind raced with questions. How long had the boy been here? Why had he remained tied to this place? Was he aware of the passage of time, or was he trapped in a single moment, reliving it endlessly? Eli felt a deep empathy for him, a connection that transcended logic. He realized that some mysteries were not meant to be solved fully, but honored, respected, and understood as part of the land's greater story. Suddenly, a soft sound, a shuffle of leaves, a faint brush against a tree, made Eli tense. The boy turned his head slightly, just enough to hint at movement. Eli froze, aware that he was witnessing something delicate, something that required patience and care. The forest seemed to hum around them, alive with an energy that was ancient and powerful. Rusty growled softly, sensing the tension, and Eli placed a hand gently on the dog's back, grounding himself in the present. Then came the moment of revelation. Eli noticed a small, weathered object half buried at the base of the tree near the boy. A piece of fabric, torn and faded, barely visible in the dim light. He recognized it immediately. It matched the description of the clothes worn by the missing child in the old stories he had heard from his grandfather. His breath caught in his throat. The boy before him was indeed the spirit of that lost child, a living echo of a life that had been cut short but remained tied to this land. Eli's mind reeled at the discovery. He had expected mysteries and legends, but he had not anticipated this level of reality. The boy's presence was a reminder of the lives that had been lost, of the stories that had remained untold, and of the power of the land to preserve memory. Eli felt a surge of responsibility, a need to honor the boy, to acknowledge his existence, and to share this story so that the memory of the child would not fade into silence. The wind whispered again, and for the first time the words seemed almost urgent, insistent. "Don't look there." Eli realized that the warning was not about fear but caution. It was about respect, about understanding that some truths were delicate, fragile, and needed to be approached with care. He felt a profound respect for the boy, the forest, and the stories that had been hidden within it for decades. He took another careful step closer, maintaining a distance that was safe and respectful. Rusty stayed alert, sensing the weight of the moment. Eli knelt slightly, trying to make himself appear less threatening, and whispered softly, "I see you. I understand. You are not forgotten." The boy's eyes glimmered faintly in response, a subtle acknowledgement that Eli could feel deep in his heart. It was as if a silent connection had been formed, a bridge between past and present, life and memory. Minutes stretched into hours, though neither Eli nor the boy seemed aware of time. The forest held its breath, and the night moved around them with a quiet intensity. Eli knew that this encounter was unique, a once-in-a-lifetime moment that would stay with him forever. He understood that some mysteries were not meant to be solved completely, but honored, cherished, and remembered. Finally, the boy took a small step backward, fading slightly into the shadows as though preparing to leave. Eli felt a pang of sorrow, but also a deep sense of gratitude. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something that connected him to the history of his land in a way he could never have imagined. The boy's eyes met his one last time, and in that gaze, Eli felt a silent promise, a reminder to respect the land, to honor its stories, and to share what he had seen with those who would listen. As the boy disappeared into the darkness, Eli remained kneeling, Rusty at his side, feeling the weight of the encounter settle over him. He understood now that the forest, the wind, and the shadows had not just been mysterious. They had been teachers, guiding him to recognize the history and memory embedded in the land. He rose slowly, taking a deep breath, and whispered to the night, "You are not forgotten. I will remember." The whispering wind carried its message one last time, "Don't look there." But Eli no longer felt fear. He felt connection, understanding, and a sense of awe at the mysteries of the Wild West. He knew that this night, this encounter, would shape him forever, leaving a story to be told, remembered, and shared for generations. Eli Thompson walked slowly back toward the open pasture, his mind still racing with the events of the night. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its silver light across the land, and the whispering wind carried its soft warning one last time. "Don't look there." But Eli no longer felt fear. Instead, he felt a quiet respect for the mysteries he had witnessed, a deep connection to the land he had always loved, and a sense of responsibility for the story he now carried. Rusty padded quietly at his side, his loyal presence a comforting anchor in the strange stillness that had settled over the forest. The experience had left Eli with a mixture of awe and humility. He realized that the Wild West was not just a place of open plains, cattle, and rugged survival. It was a land alive with history, memory, and unseen presences. The boy he had encountered was a reminder of lives that had been lost, of stories that had remained untold, and of the quiet power of nature to preserve memory. Eli understood that some mysteries were not meant to be fully explained but respected, and that his role was to witness, honor, and share what he had learned. Over the next few days, Eli returned to his routines on the ranch, but everything felt different. The familiar sounds of the wind, the rustle of leaves, and the calls of distant animals now carried a new significance. He noticed small details he had once overlooked, the patterns of shadows under the trees, the way the moonlight shifted across the pasture, the subtle changes in the air before a storm. Every sound, every movement reminded him of that night, of the boy, and of the delicate balance between the seen and unseen in the world around him. Eli also began sharing his experience with the few neighboring ranchers he trusted. Some listened with wide-eyed curiosity, others with skepticism. Yet, he felt it was important to speak of what he had witnessed, to preserve the memory of the boy, and to honor the land's quiet warning. He recounted the whispering wind, the stillness of the forest, the fleeting glimmer of the boy's eyes, and the sense of connection he had felt. While some dismissed it as imagination or a trick of the light, others nodded in understanding, for the Wild West was a place where stories of mystery and legend were not uncommon. Despite the reactions, Eli remained undeterred. He knew the truth of what he had seen, and he carried it with a solemn pride. The encounter had changed him, not only in how he viewed the forest, but in how he understood his own place within the land. He realized that the ranch, his family's legacy, and the natural world around him were intertwined with the stories of those who had come before. The boy's spirit was part of that history, a reminder that the past never truly disappears. It lingers, watching, teaching, and waiting to be acknowledged. In the weeks that followed, Eli made small but meaningful changes to how he cared for the land. He approached every task with renewed mindfulness, whether repairing fences, guiding cattle, or walking along the forest's edge. He spoke to Rusty often during these walks, sharing his thoughts aloud as though the dog could understand the weight of the experience. "We have to be careful, Rusty. We have to respect it," he would say, his voice carrying into the quiet fields. And though Rusty could not respond in words, his steady companionship reminded Eli that he was not alone in facing the mysteries of the land. Eli also began documenting the stories of the Wild West, recording accounts from older ranchers, settlers, and anyone who had experienced the unexplained. He realized that these tales were more than entertainment. They were lessons, warnings, and connections to a time when life was harder, and the land spoke in ways that demanded attention. Writing them down became a mission, a way to preserve the past and ensure that the voices of those who had been lost, like the boy, would not be forgotten. Months passed, and life on the ranch returned to a rhythm that was familiar yet forever changed. Eli continued his evening walks along the edge of the forest, always alert but no longer fearful. He would pause at the same spots where he had first seen the boy, listening to the wind and observing the shadows. Sometimes in the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a flicker, a movement that was gone when he looked directly. He smiled softly to himself, understanding that some presences were meant to be glimpsed briefly, not fully captured. The boy's spirit, he realized, was a guardian of the land, a reminder that history lived on in quiet, unseen ways. Eli's story gradually spread beyond his ranch. Travelers, historians, and storytellers who visited the area were eager to hear about the mysterious encounter. He recounted it carefully, emphasizing respect, observation, and caution. He spoke of the whispering wind, the stillness of the forest, and the fleeting presence of the boy, always careful to frame the tale as a lesson rather than a thrill. The story became a part of the larger tapestry of the Wild West, joining countless legends of mystery, courage, and respect for the land. Despite the attention, Eli remained humble. He never sought fame or recognition for what he had experienced. For him, the encounter was a personal revelation, a quiet acknowledgement of the deep, enduring connection between humans and the natural world. He often reflected on the night, on the boy, and on the lessons he had learned. Courage, he realized, was not the absence of fear but the willingness to face it with respect. And sometimes, he understood, the most profound experiences were those that could not be fully explained, only honored. One evening, many months later, Eli stood once again at the edge of the forest, Rusty at his side. The sun was setting, casting long shadows and painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and red. He paused, breathing deeply, feeling the familiar rhythm of the wind against his face. For a moment, he thought he saw a small figure in the distance, standing silently among the trees. His heart skipped a beat, but he did not move forward. He simply watched, understanding that some mysteries were meant to be witnessed in silence, not disturbed. The whisper of the wind carried its familiar message one last time. "Don't look there." Eli nodded to himself, a quiet smile on his face. He knew that the warning was not one of fear, but of respect, of mindfulness, and of acknowledging the past. He felt gratitude for the boy, for the land, and for the stories that had shaped him. The Wild West, with all its beauty, danger, and mystery, had revealed a truth he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Eli returned to his ranch that night with a sense of peace. The stars shone brightly overhead, the prairie stretched endlessly, and the wind whispered softly through the grass. He knew that he had witnessed something extraordinary, something that connected him to the history of the land and the lives that had come before. The boy's spirit, the forest, and the stories of the Wild West had taught him lessons of courage, respect, and the power of memory. In the years that followed, Eli continued to work his land with care and reverence. He shared his story sparingly but meaningfully, always emphasizing the importance of listening to the land, observing quietly, and honoring the past. Travelers who visited the ranch often asked about the legends of the area, and Eli would tell them, always mindful of the boy who had shown him the true depth of the Wild West's mysteries. Eli Thompson lived out his days on the ranch, surrounded by the vast, open plains he loved. Though the years passed and the seasons changed, he never forgot that night at the edge of the forest, the whispering wind, or the boy who had appeared like a living memory. The encounter had changed him, teaching him to see beyond the ordinary, to respect the unseen, and to cherish the connection between past and present. And sometimes, when the wind rustled through the trees and the shadows shifted just so, Eli would pause and listen. In the soft, almost imperceptible whisper of the breeze, he could still hear the words that had guided him that night. "Don't look there." And he would smile, knowing that some mysteries of the Wild West were eternal, meant to be honored, respected, and remembered. The story of Eli Thompson and the boy at the edge of the forest became one of the many legends of the Wild West, a tale of courage, curiosity, and the deep, enduring connection between humans and the land. It reminded those who heard it that some stories are not just tales but living memories, waiting to be witnessed, understood, and carried forward into the future. Eli's life continued, simple yet meaningful, but he always carried the memory of that night with him. The boy's presence, though fleeting, had left an indelible mark on his heart and mind. He understood now that the Wild West was more than just a land of cattle and open plains. It was a place of history, mystery, and life lessons that stretched across time. And so, under the endless sky of the prairie, Eli Thompson walked with Rusty at his side, honoring the land, remembering the past, and embracing the quiet mysteries that made life in the Wild West unforgettable.